Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing today? I hope you're well. Today, I want to talk a bit about democracy in a nutshell. What is it and where are they heading to? Do they even know? We have to look at how democracy was born. It's been around for a long time. You can find it in amongst the Greeks. There was a Greek philosopher who philosophized about what is today known as a democratic world, a world free of everything where people had a choice to do what they want. There's of course anarchic systems as well, but we're not going there. Let's just look at democracy. There was a Second World War of which everyone's memory is fading. But during the Second World War, there were three countries ruled by single rulers. There was Germany with Hitler, Italy with Mussolini, and of course Japan with the shogun. And these three countries, they fought against everyone else. England, France, late. America came in very late in the war in after the Japanese bombed one of their harbors, which was right there by Japan. And Australia, New Zealand, even South Africa fought against those countries. And they, of course, lost. So it was as if the countries who practiced, if you like, democracy, they won the Second World War. So they won the whole war. But of course, the Soviet Union emerged as the superpower of the eastern half of the world. So there were two superpowers, and the Soviets were not a democracy. They never were, and they're still not one. They always have a single ruler. Lately, it's Putin. At that time, it was Stalin. And they were socialists, and they were Soviet people, and the government was declared themselves to be atheist, although they had huge Orthodox Christian churches all over, and they also had a huge Muslim population. Up until today, their Muslim population is even bigger than it was in the 1940s. Now, the Second World War had a huge impact on the world, especially on the Western world, and especially on the Christian world, if you can call them Christian, because at that time they had already divorced the church from the state, and they were busy dismantling the two and moving it apart to where they are today. But I started working in 1979, 1980, which was what 35 years after the end of the Second World War. 35 years, that's not a long time. And I clearly remember people, and we had about 2 million people of British descent that were living here and that were residents in South Africa. They were more citizen than we were because of apartheid. But we used to work together. And they were always talking about so far, so good. If you spoke about anything related to the war, about Hitler or about what was it like, what do your parents say, what was it like during the war, they would tell you stories, and then they would say so far so good. Meaning, after 35 years, we haven't really had another war. And you must know, everybody was thinking about the atom bomb at that time. And so the avoidance of World War III is foremost on everybody's mind, or at least on all their mind, because they are of the opinion that they have the ability to destroy this whole world. We know that that's not possible. I mean, with black clouds and dark clouds and atomic winter and radioactivity and all those things, there's no way that they can destroy all living creatures and all human beings on this dunya. That's not going to happen. But the whole thing is theorized and hyped up so much that they can bomb the entire world into non-existence. So they will do everything in their power to avoid it. And so what they did was they came up with this. Now they rule the world, so democracy was the way to go, and they have a basic constitution, and they chop and change it and amend it as they see fit. But they are all man-made laws. And so they don't really know where they're going to, and they don't really know exactly what it is they are doing. They talk about freedom, but what does that mean? They talk about choice. When they talk about choice, they don't mean that you must be free to choose whether you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. They mean you must be free to choose to do whatever you want, anything that you want. Nothing is anathema, and everything is on the table. And so, in order to do that, and in order to get a society where people change and move away from religion, you have to have ambiguity. You have to have people being non-judgmental and people not having any level of morality and understanding of what is right and wrong so that they can't judge. And for that, you have to use ambiguity. So you must make everybody doubtful about everything. And so obviously, that is translating into people growing up being doubtful about whether they are male or female. Doesn't matter if they have a penis or a vagina. That is not the point, because you can just cut it off and put something else there, or have something fashioned for you, and then you are female or a male. So this is on the increase. And nobody's born effeminate, or nobody's born a male in a female's body. It's people's minds that make tell them that I'm a man in a woman's body. That's your mind telling you that. And it's the people around you that messed up your mind. So we find that there's a lot more of these homosexuals, people of the same sex. There's a lot more um, bisexuals, and it's because everything is about sex, sex, and sex. There's a high school not far from me. It's a former girls' high school. It's still a girls' high school. It's in a former white area. It's a former white school. The principal is a lesbian. And the school, it's a girls' high school, still a girls' high school, but the girls' high school is full of boys, but they're all that way inclined, if I can put it that way. So, are you going to let your children go to schools like that? Look what's happening in the States now. I mean, somebody is controlling this thing, because why is it all happening now at the beginning of 2023 or towards the end of 2022? Who decided that this must take place at the start of 2023? Someone is doing it. It's not like it just popped up at one school. It's all over. It's even here in South Africa and in the States. And it's going to happen all over. Now, they don't know where all this is heading to. They don't. They can't. It's, it's this whole notion of freedom. And there's, of course, freedom of speech also. But freedom of speech only works when you talk out against religion, because before you weren't free to say, because it was blasphemous, that was the word that was used. So now there's freedom of speech. But you're not free to talk out against democracy and all these things that are going on. Where's the Muslim leadership? Nobody's talking. And people are fond of saying, even Muslims amongst us, they say, just put your TV off. And that is actually a way of now allowing these things to happen and allowing it to influence our children. Because we should be working and talking and discussing about how do we get away from these things. Because our children grew up with TVs. We never grew up with television. I was about 17, 18 years old when my father bought a television. South Africa only came in when I was South Africa. TV's only got to South Africa when I was 17 years old. So I never grew up with a TV. So your children and your grandchildren especially, they are going to grow up starting off with all of this. They're going to start with this, so it's going to be perfectly normal for them. And as Muslims, when we go to Muslim countries, there's none of this going on. I went to Malaysia twice because um, my my ancestors they were brought here by the Dutch. So I went to go and see what it's like in Malaysia. It's such a beautiful country. They speak Bahasa. We still use about 20 Bahasa words interspersed with English and Afrikaans. We speak about four different languages in one go: English, Afrikaans, Bahasa, and Arabic. I went to Malaysia and it's such a beautiful country. When I was in the shops and in the masjid for Jummah, it felt like I was here at home. The Imam looked like a Cape Townian when he was reciting. And after the Salah, it looked like I could just walk up and take somebody's hand and start talking to them. But of course, there's a language barrier because they only speak Bahasa. But in Malaysia, there's about 7 channels that just has Bahasa, and it's very cultural and it's all about Malay culture. About 45 to 47% of Malaysia are Malaysians of Chinese origin, and you can see that they are Chinese, but they speak fluent Bahasa. And if you talk to them and say something about China, then they get offended. They'll say, "I'm not Chinese, I'm Malaysian." You realize quickly that they don't identify with China at all. And there are 3 Chinese TV channels because they speak Mandarin as well. They are bilingual. In the workplace, they speak Malaysian, and at home, they speak Mandarin. So they have 3 Mandarin TV channels, which promotes their own culture so they can bring their children up. There's no democracy influence on them. And it's the same in other Muslim countries, like in Saudi and Morocco, where I've been to, Zanzibar. Nothing like that. So the world is going to become a lot more polarized. But the point that I want to make is that democracy or the Western world, they've got no idea where they're going to end up. And yet, their society is changing like this all the time. And they're constantly having to adapt their laws and to include things that wasn't around. So who knows? It might sound ridiculous, but in a year or two, they might be able to marry their dog, and so will you. So again, I say I'm glad that I'm on my way out, but it affects me when I think about my granddaughter, and inshallah, any grandchildren that will come about in our family. So think about what I said because nobody's saying anything. Everybody's just going along with the flow, hoping that things won't happen to them. But your grandchildren are going to have to go to school. They're going to have to use one toilet, boys and girls. They're going to be exposed to all kinds of sex toys and taught about sex and masturbation and all these things which which is just going to make things worse. You won't be able to walk as a male down the road without getting raped. That's what's going to happen. Try to think about what life was when you were young, where we didn't even know what rape was. We never heard that word mentioned. We had no idea. Today, we throw it about like it means nothing. Nothing. It's still like that in Muslim countries, in most Muslim countries, even the ones that are occupied by majority Europeans. They adapt their behavior and their dress to the Islamic standards of the country because the rulers are Muslim. They might not be visible, but the laws of the land Muslim laws. So might not be full Sharia laws, but you can't misbehave there. I mean, look at the Qatar Soccer World Cup and compare it to other soccer matches. Tells you a lot, says a lot, and it opened a lot of Europeans' eyes, and it made a lot of them revert to Islam. But what's the point of them reverting to Islam if we are becoming so westernized? Yeah, and our children are becoming more westernized, and their children are becoming more westernized. It's depressing. Salaam alaikum.